Hey everybody, welcome to Out of the Ordinary with Jay, and we're going to talk a subject that you should always talk about, especially at Thanksgiving and holidays, and that's religion. And so I'm with a gentleman here by the name of Phil. And Phil, are you religious?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Were
you religious?
I wouldn't say I was ever religious, but I was brought up in the Roman Catholic Church. My parents were Roman Catholic.
That's pretty religious.
Yeah, but they weren't. It's not as though we said grace before every meal and whatnot. It was
ash on your head.
It was, yeah. I went to Catholic school from first grade all the way through high school. So yeah, the ashes on the head was not an option. It just you did it because you did it in school.
So you're not religious now, but you had every opportunity to definitely be religious.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
But I pretty much lost my faith, so to speak. Definitely by the time I was 13. I think by the time I was 11, I was questioning the existence of God and religion in general.
Was there any seminal moment, or was it just thinking?
No, I was, from the time I was very young, I was interested in astronomy, and so I was reading lots of books and whatnot on astronomy and science in general, and religion just made less and less sense to me as time went on. So like I said, by the time I was 13...
Yeah, right, real quick, I have heard this. If you run religion through the scientific method, it becomes challenging. This is what I've heard.
Yeah.
So that would make sense, that you being into science would make it more difficult to.
There are plenty of scientists. There are plenty of scientists who are believers, but they're probably, they're a large fraction of scientists, if not the majority, do not adhere to any particular religious beliefs.
Can I ask you a question real quick? So
sure.
0 on a scale of 0 to 100, 0 being not at all religious, and 100 being I'm the most religious, where are you?
0.
You're a 0. Okay, so you're not religious at all.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
fine.
I like to think religion is a fascinating topic. I've been doing a lot of reading on religion, the history of religions and different religions across the world, because I find the topic fascinating, but I don't harbor any religious beliefs myself.
Okay.
Not now. But
do you have any fear whatsoever of going to hell?
No.
How come?
Well, I feel that if there is a God, and this God is supposed to be benevolent and loving and whatnot, then why would this being make me in such a way that, knowing that that some people are not going to believe because they don't see the evidence for the existence of a God, why would that supreme being provide, even make that an option for a person?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to believe in me without any really hard evidence, and if you don't, I've designed your brain so that you think critically and you evaluate the evidence that's presented to you. And if you decide that the evidence isn't convincing and you opt not to believe in me, then I'm going to send you to hell and torture you for eternity. What kind of a loving God is that? I wouldn't even do, if I created creatures and gave them that option to look at the evidence before them and decide. And first of all, if I could create living organisms, I'm not going to require they worship me. I wouldn't care. It's like,
so could I ask you this
I'm
question?
not going to send them to hell if they don't.
I just want to make sure we have this right. I want to make sure I have what your opinion is on it. So your idea is hell does not worry you, because if the God that's out there is benevolent, he's going to give you a pass in the end anyway? Or he should?
It should.
Okay. Because this kind of reminds me, are you familiar with Pascal's wager? Do you know what that is?
Yes.
So for those of you that don't know, I think it's Blaise Pascal. He I think mathematician, scientist, or whatever.
Yeah.
But he basically, I think he was not religious, but he said he might as well believe anyways, because, if he's a believer in religion and he's wrong, there's no harm, no foul. but if it's right, then he gets to go to heaven and not go to hell. And so that was the idea, is like, well, why not believe anyways, right? I mean, that's essentially the way. I probably butchered it, but isn't that kind of the
right? But that makes no sense at all, because if you say, well, I might as well believe, because then I'm erring on the side of caution.
Yeah,
so if there really is a
idea.
God, then. But if that's the only reason you're believing, then you don't really believe. And if there is this omnipotent, omniscient being that knows everything, well, what's in your head, that being is going to know, oh, you're faking it. You don't really believe. You're just hedging your bets.
Okay, now so you brought up something that I think is excellent, that I'd like to challenge / agree with you on, or that I find interesting. So you're talking about true believers, and those that should true believe, right?
Right.
And I say everybody's hedging to some degree, at least that I know, because otherwise it almost seems, I know this is going to sound crass and probably people are going to beat me up in the comments for this, but it almost seems like if you were a true adherent to religion and you got cancer, you'd be like, yes, here we go, baby. I get to go to the promised land. And so if you're not adhering to that, you're already hedging in the wrong direction, right? You're hedging towards science. You're hedging towards medicine. You're hedging in the other direction, because otherwise, again, if you were in a fatal car accident or somebody you knew was, you should be thinking, hallelujah, they've left this godforsaken planet and they're in a better place, right?
Well, you bring up another very interesting point. You know, a lot of people who say they believe, I'm not sure how much they believe. I think a lot of people who feel that they absolutely 100% believe in the existence of God, I would hazard to say that a lot of them really don't, because when they get cancer, when they get in a car accident, if you get in a car accident, what do? You call 911, because you know when you call 911, someone's going to come help you. You don't sit in your car and start praying, oh, please, God, help me, you know, whatever.
You wouldn't even want that. You would be. I'm making the point. I'm making your point, which is say you would want to say, oh, please let me bleed out and let me out of here as soon as possible.
Well,
I want to die quickly.
Yeah, I'm
like,
assuming,
you know what I mean? Like, no, but I mean, but that should be the.
Right.
Again, your ship has come in. You're out of here.
Right. There's two different things. You shouldn't be anxious to get to the afterlife. Why waste time here if I can just get to the afterlife like that?
Right.
Right. But the other thing is, let's say you're injured but not so badly you're going to die. Then of course you call 911 because you know someone's going to. Now maybe after you call 911 you're going to pray too, but very few people are going to just sit there in their car and say, I'm not going to call 911. I'm going to pray to God, and God's going to help me, and a miracle will happen, and I walk out of the car, no injuries, no nothing. You know, I have a broken leg, but He'll repair my. No, it's not going to happen. So the reason they call 911 is because they know if I need help, and I'm not going to get help by just praying to God. Now maybe God will help, but I need the people to do something. And so look what happens with people who refuse medical care. They have children who are ill, or they're ill themselves,
or die,
and they refuse medical care. They know they're praying, they're laying hands on, and all this.
Yeah, but those guys, at least I have to give it up for them. They're true believers.
Right. They are.
I mean, at least they're straight up devout,
right.
And you can't those you could say are definitely faithful.
Right. Those people are.
Yeah.
They are the true believers because they believe God will help them.
Right.
And if God doesn't, then of course they just say, well, it wasn't part of God's plan. God's plan was for me to get sicker and die or whatever.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I would just say that I find pretty interesting is just to kind of piggyback on your thing is like I find all too often I'll see somebody that let's say they have they get some horrific injury out of nowhere. You know, they're riding their bike and some car smashes them, busts their leg into a million pieces or whatever. And, you know, they'll be like, they might say something like, "Oh, well, thank God they're alive." But then they never go the first step, which is like, dang it, God, why'd you run them over?
Right.
Or why'd you let them get run over? You know, and I just find that interesting how, you could have, maybe you have two offspring and both have some genetic disease and one lives and one dies. You know what I mean? What do you, I don't know how, that seems challenging to reconcile in almost every religion, I think.
Yeah.
Right or no?
Yeah, well, it seems that in many religions, God gets all the credit but doesn't take any of the blame. So when something good happens, you say, thank God, God was looking out for me, etc.
Right.
But when something bad happens, some people will say, well, it's Satan, or it's part of God's plan. God works in mysterious ways. I don't know why this happened, but there must be a reason for it. Well, sometimes shit just happens. But there's an excuse for everything. No matter what happens, a person can rationalize it as being part of God's plan or God's will for some reason or other, even if we can't deduce what that is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the whole, the atheistic. One of the atheistic arguments that I've heard is they'll say like, well, the claims are that God is both omniscient, all-knowing, and omnipotent, all-powerful. So even if you were to include the devil and his misdeeds in there, that means God knew it and let it happen,
Right.
and had the power to stop it, and didn't, right? I mean, that's the argument.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenging argument to overcome. But I'm interested. I expect to be interviewing some people that are rather quite religious before too long, and I would like to see what their answers are to that question, because that one's been difficult for me to try to, be fair-minded and like, okay, how can I assign this? And I've not been able to get my arms around that one.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any benefit to religion? Because you see like religious charities, most hospitals are named after somebody.
Yeah. I think people are generous and want to help their fellow human beings in any instance, regardless of whether or not I don't think religion's required for that. I think we all have empathy and compassion for our fellow humans, and when people are in need, then some people are going to step up.
So it's your opinion that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it your opinion that being good and like being moral is more like innate in human nature versus an edict and some book or God telling you? Is that
absolutely?
That's your opinion?
Yeah. Because I think we survived as a species only because we have empathy and compassion for our fellow human beings. Humans are social animals. We could not survive if we didn't help each other. Humans have historically lived in groups, and humans are not solitary creatures, and so we look out for each other, we help each other because we know that's going to ensure our survival.
So being a non-believer, as you are, how do you explain, or why do you think there's so many religions out there? It's there's so many, and so many people are adherents to it.
I think there are two reasons. Number one, I'll state this one first. Okay. I think that religion was, if not the first, it was one of the first attempts of humanity to explain the world and the universe around them, because people don't understand.
Well, that makes sense, sure.
Yeah, usually if you see something happening, then you will imagine some kind of, or postulate some kind of agent. So for example, there's a storm and lightning. Why is there this storm? What is
Zeus,
creating
Thor.
it? Right. It's Zeus hurling thunderbolts, or Thor, or whatever the case may be. Why is there a storm out in the ocean, or tidal wave? Poseidon, right? Poseidon or Neptune. That there has to, if you see, like there's a garbage can right over here, your viewers can't see, but if that garbage can is just sitting there, if it suddenly falls over by itself, I'm going to wonder, how did that happen? Something had to push it over.
Well, like your Poseidon example I can understand that really well, because as an example, I think this is the point you're making, is like, as a human being, right, I could go into my sink or bathtub and put a little rubber ducky there and go like this, and make it move, right? So my own experience, if I saw that happening in a grander scale in the ocean, I might be like, oh, there's just a really big, powerful one of me out there that's causing this. In other words, so there's a frame of reference to make.
Precisely.
Are you basically making the point that, like, pre-science, it was a way to explain things that were otherwise
Precisely.
unknown. That's
Right.
what you would
yeah.
say.
What causes
Okay.
the storm at the sea? And you could say, so this hypothesized or believed that there was a god in the ocean, Poseidon or Neptune or whatever. But then you could say, well, no. The reason the sea is rough is because there's a hurricane. So it's the wind that's blowing the water and creating the waves. All right, well then what's causing the wind and the storm? There must be some agent, some intelligent agent that is causing that. So Thor, or whatever the case may be, the wind god or something
Whatever,
else.
right.
So every culture has had gods for rain and gods for the sun god, rain god.
That's
you
only
name
the
it.
really old ones, though, because all the new ones, it's usually a monotheistic
Right,
God that
because
controls everything.
over time religions have evolved and
I
they've
see.
become more and more sophisticated, and so now the predominant religions are the three big monotheistic religions, and then of course you have Hinduism and Buddhism, which Hinduism is definitely a religion. Buddhism, I'm not sure if Confucianism isn't really a religion, it's more of a philosophy, a way of life, and I'm not sure I think Buddhism is kind of in that camp, but I don't know enough about it. I haven't read enough about Buddhism and Confucianism to know enough about it. But yeah, the monotheistic religions are the ones that hold sway today.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying that religion was, what is still to this day for many people, an explainer of things, right? That's what
Right.
people, Genesis, right? The God was the creator of the universe, right?
Right.
Are you saying that there's new and better information as far as you're concerned, and so those no longer hold weight with you?
Absolutely.
Is
yeah,
that your- is that your-
that's the whole God of the gaps argument. Is that when
What does that mean, God of the gaps argument?
pre-scientific times, humans had very little understanding of how the world works.
Okay.
Very little. Aristotle was one of the first to develop a science of physics, to attempt to explain the physical nature of the world around us. But by and large, people thought that everything was, God ran the world. So there was a divine influence governing everything going on. So the angels pushed the planets around in their orbits around the Earth. They thought that the Earth was the center of the universe and the geocentric model and all that stuff. But then, as science advanced, we came to understand, a storm is a result of atmospheric phenomena. Lightning is just an electrical discharge which occurs in the thundercloud because you have electric current set up with convection, hot air rising, cool air sinking. You get convection, you get separation of charge, you get an electric discharge, a thunderbolt. And so as science explained more and more things, God still remained. This is the God of the gaps argument, is that God was used to explain what we don't understand. So as time goes on and science explains more and more and more about how the world and the universe works, the gaps become smaller and smaller. So now you have people saying, well, yeah, there was the Big Bang, and this is how the elements were created, and this blah, blah, blah. And then, let me, if you don't mind, I just want to finish this thought.
Yeah, please,
so, of course, the big question is, well, what happened before the Big Bang? What caused the Big Bang? So there you go. That's where God comes in. There had to be an initial cause. And so they say to a scientist, a cosmologist, for instance, well, what caused the Big Bang? But the thing is, and if you don't have an answer, they say, see, you don't know. That's because God did it. But for a scientist would say, I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. That's how science works. Yeah. We don't know. That's why we're researching it. We're trying to learn more.
I talked with another person. They call themselves a free thinker atheist, but they challenged me with the Big Bang thing. I said, oh, well, how would the Big Bang get there? And I said, wasn't that done by a creator? And they said, okay. They're like, I'll give you that one if you can tell me who created your creator.
Exactly.
And I was like,
right.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Right.
I'm like
Turtles
you.
all
I'm
the
like
way
you.
down.
I'm like exactly. I'm like you one up to me there. So I feel like science has come a long way. I mean, we've got rockets and cell phones and so much technology. So why are you in the minority?
I think it's just hard for people to give up old old ways of thinking. And that's the one reason people, that was the first reason for why religion is prevalent in this day and age, is because it's been there for a long time, because religion was the initial attempt to explain the world around us.
Old money versus new money.
There you go. But the second reason is, and I think this may be a more powerful reason, is the fear of dying. Humans are the only creatures that we know of that are aware of their own mortality. And we know we're going to die at some point. And that thought frightens us, the idea of not existing. And so people want to live beyond the time of their death. And so I think religion arose as a way to address that,
the ultimate question,
the ultimate insecurity, the fact that we're all going to die. And it's basically being in denial.
Yeah, I can't tell you any person I know of, any of my religious friends, or of any denomination or any faith, and those that are not religious, where mortality is not, top of mind, even in younger people.
Right.
It's just this thing.
Right.
It's just constant and consistent. It's just always coming out of nowhere.
Right.
Or some song will remind you of it, something you'll see will remind you of it. It just happens. So I get that.
Yeah, it's just, in fact, people are afraid of dying and not existing, but I just heard this on I was watching a debate online recently, and I can't remember who it was, but the person said, well, do you remember 1912 or something like that? And the person says, no, I wasn't alive then. Right. Or no, he said, are you afraid of 1912? The person says, no, I wasn't even alive then. There you go. So why are you afraid of dying? Right. In 2112 you'll be dead. But you know what? It's just going to be like 1912. You won't exist.
Yeah,
you won't even know it. So
there is some philosopher, I'm going to get it wrong who it was. I can't remember who said it, but I wish I could remember who it was, because they need credit for this. It's a really good one. But they basically said, I fear the afterlife, or I fear being dead as much as I feared things before I was born.
There you go. Yeah.
Something to that effect.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's pretty good.
That's pretty profound.
Yeah, it's like, but it is weird to think about. It's like, anyway. Yeah, I mean, I get it. So maybe you answered this already, but so why do you think, given all the scientific advancement and stuff, from your perspective, that it is still so persistent and it's still so strong? Is it just the mortality thing?
I think,
or is it cultural? Is it
it's
tradition?
that. I think it's that, and tradition too, of course. Yeah. And people, the thing is that most people are indoctrinated with religion at a very young age, and when things that you're taught when you're young tend to stick with you. Now, obviously, not all the time. Like me, I was brought up Roman Catholic, but like I said, by the time I was 13, I was definitely a non-believer. I went to Catholic high school all the way through age 17, or until almost my 18th birthday. But I was going to a really good school. I was getting a very good education there, and I liked the school. And it made my parents happy. My parents knew I was not a believer, but I didn't want to create more conflict at home, and so I basically faked it in school. Which is kind of terrible, but for a kid, now at my age, of course, I wouldn't do that. That would be, I wouldn't be true to my conscience. But at that age, you're just
going along to get along.
Yeah, you're going along to get along, and you're still learning how to live. You're maturing. Yeah. You're still learning what's the proper way to act on your convictions. And
your story sounds very similar to another friend of mine who his whatever coming out story, or whatever you want to call it, him going from being a religious person to a non-religious person happened at a pretty early age also. And then I asked him how it happened, and it was sort of ironic, because his parents were both pretty super religious. And then what started to happen is, he found out that the tooth fairy wasn't real, Santa Claus wasn't real, right? And he was a pretty smart fella, and he's putting it together. And then what was the final nail in the coffin for him was he didn't have a lot of friends, and so he had made up this imaginary friend his whole life, or up until that point. And his parents are like, quit pretending. You can't be playing with your imaginary friend anymore. You have to grow up. And
grow up.
Boom. Like
Yep.
that was his moment. And I don't think, I mean, he might have been like 8 or 9 years old or whatever, but it was so jarring. And what was ironic about that is they were telling him, you can't play with an imaginary friend or whatever, because he said his parents were so religious, it was in conflict. Like you couldn't believe in fantasy, right? You had to believe in this way. And he just like made some connections. He's like,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
then I can't do this either.
Right.
And he did the
Because-
same thing. He went along until college.
Yeah.
But that was his thing. Is like he said, yeah. He goes. I knew at a really early age, because he goes, my parents' thing basically backfired on them, and I was like, whoa, that's kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, well, it's like if you ever watch Young Sheldon, and he would say to his mother,
yes.
you believe in an invisible man in the sky," and all this is it's exactly that point.
Yeah, that was a funny show.
Oh, it was a great show.
Yes.
That was fantastic.
All right, we're gonna leave it there. That was our talk with non-believer here, and thank you, Phil, for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.